Alright, it's Henry again, and this is part 4 of my airbrush tutorial video series. And in this part, we are actually going to start painting. And remember, at the end of part 3, we thinned our paint for the airbrush, and now all we have to do is load it up and start painting. Turn over here. Now I got these little mixing spoons. Let's see. It's a pack called Mr. Mix 2. Best $4 I ever spent. And I just use those to pour the paint into the airbrush. Wipe my spoon off. And we're ready to go. Alright. So, with a single action airbrush, this is a double action, by the way. With a single action airbrush, you pretty much have one option for painting, and that's this. It's pretty much a glorified spray can where the paint is a little bit thinner and you can mix the colors up yourself, and you can control the air pressure via the regulator. But with a double action airbrush, you do have some control over air pressure. You can sort of halfway push down on the trigger, but more of your air pressure control is going to be with the regulator or one of these micro air control valves if you've got one. But the real control comes from the paint flow, because depending on how far you pull back on this trigger, you can do super fine hairline detail like this, by just barely pulling back on the trigger at all. Or you can pull all the way back and get pretty much what you would be doing with a single action airbrush, like so. So lots and lots of control with a double action airbrush. So let's get to painting an actual part. It's a leftover part from Master Grade 12 Geese 3. What you want to do is paint the part with as few layers as possible. Now, I usually do 2, sometimes 3 layers of paint. That usually gets the job done for me. Now, you don't want to paint the part all in one coat. If you're painting getting your parts painted with one coat of paint, you're probably painting it too thick. See, this first coat, it's not the same color as the paint. It's lighter because, you know, it's just a really thin coat of paint. And what that's going to do is basically just going to make your paint job smoother. And then you go over it a second time. Get a little bit darker, a little bit closer to the color of the paint. You see, it is darker, but it's still not quite there. You can do it one more coat, and that's pretty much going to get the job done. I'm obviously not painting the entire part here, but for the sake of the video, you know, 3 coats and you've got a uniform color of paint. Now, this is pretty much where you need to stop. Your goal is to get solid, uniform color like this in as few coats as possible. So, if you get the job done in 2 coats, 2 coats is all you need. If you get the job done in 3 coats, 3 coats is all you need. There's no need to go any further than that. Now, let's see. Here's the other shoulder armor. What you absolutely should not do is do this. Now see, if you just point the airbrush at one spot, come on camera, point the airbrush at one spot and spray, your paint is going to start running everywhere, and that's going to leave you with a really crappy paint job. So, number 1, don't get too close. Don't paint from like an inch away. I usually paint from about 2 or 3 inches away, something like this. And like I said, just a good technique is to keep the airbrush moving at all times. You really shouldn't be keeping the airbrush still and painting in one spot, because even from 2 or 3 inches away, there's still the possibility that the paint is going to start to run because this paint is so thin. And if this does happen, by the way, you're probably going to want to go back with some paint thinner, maybe even some diluted paint thinner, and clean that up, because even if you paint over this, like I'm doing here, the texture of that paint is still going to be there. See, even though I painted over it, you can still tell where that was. So keeping your airbrush moving and not painting too close are two things that you really want to do. But other than that, it's just a case of practice makes perfect. As far as paint flow, I find that unless you're just doing like fine detail work, you're not going to be doing those hairline details unless you're doing like pre-shading or some sort of specific weathering. And you're almost never going to have the paint going full blast like that. Hardly ever. In fact, that's a really good way to have a really crappy paint job, because again, paint will just run everywhere and it's not going to look pretty. So usually you're going to be somewhere in between, about halfway between minimum detail or minimum paint flow rather, and maximum paint flow. And as far as PSI goes, I usually work around 10 to 12 PSI. Most of the time it's closer to 12. Some people like to use as much as 15 PSI. And that's pretty much all there is to it. Like I said, I'm just going over the basic techniques, just showing you guys how to get a smooth, uniform paint job on your kit. There's other techniques where you can mess with the nozzle and do like splattering effects and stuff like that, but honestly, unless you're doing weathering, you're not going to use that hardly ever for gunpla. So I guess that just about does it for this video. And in part 5, I will go over doing pre-shading and highlighting and gradients and some of the more fancy airbrushing techniques. So with that, I'll see you guys next time.